we have had such a great conversation. I almost want to say we saved the best for last, but everybody from the beginning of this summit has been just incredibly generous with the learning that we've had, the conversations that we've had. But we're at the final stretch. And so now it's my honor to introduce our final speaker, Linda Darling Hammond. A little bit of background. Most of you know this amazing leader in California, in addition to being the president of the State Board of Education. She is also professor emeritus at Stanford University School of Education and the founding president of the Learning Policy Institute. She has been a leader in education policy for decades and certainly is a leader in our California education policy today. We are incredibly honored to have her as our concluding speaker for today. And with that, I am honored to introduce you, Linda Darling Hammond, to our audience. And we're also eager to hear from you and learn from you.
Thank you so very much. And it's such a pleasure to be here. I hope my screen is being shared and you can hear me okay. Holler if you can't. And I just want to add my congratulations to Becky Sullivan for all of her work, and to the Sacramento County Office of Education, which is one of our lead county offices, for the work that's going on with literacy. Senator Portantino as well. I was honored to work with him on the universal screening bill last year, and we're all thrilled that it is coming to fruition. I want to thank the Reading Coalition for your passion and your energy around this incredibly important topic. And of course, Todd Collins, who exemplifies that passion and that energy. And I'm going to speak today about literacy as a civil right, as I consider it, from my perspective as state board president in California. However, I come to this issue from many perspectives. As the parent of 3 children, 2 of whom are dyslexic, as the former high school teacher who of English, who often had students in my high school classroom who could not read and really needed to be sort of back to the very beginning, and as somebody who's been passionate about this for many, many years. The power of literacy is enormous, and that is why there were laws for many years in the southern states preventing enslaved people from being taught to read. And this is from the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, who pointed out when he lived in Master Hugh's family for 7 years, he said, I succeeded in learning to read and write. I was compelled to resort to various stratagems. I was narrowly watched. If I was in a separate room for any considerable length of time, I was sure to be suspected of having a book and was at once called to give an account of myself. All this, however, was too late. The first step had been taken. Mistress, in teaching me the alphabet, had given me the inch, and no precaution could prevent me from taking the L. And I think this is what we need for all of our children, is the pathway to the empowerment that literacy provides. We've had quite a long road in California, and there's quite a long road to go. Where we've been just a little over a decade ago, following many, many years of budget cuts and other problematic policy, California was one of the lowest spending states in the country. It had the largest class sizes in the country. We had sort of a test and punish approach to accountability, not much investment in professional development. We were 46th and 48th in 4th and 8th grade reading in the United States, at the very bottom. But much has happened since then. In 2010, we got new standards for English language arts. In 2012, we got new standards for English language development. In 2014, we got our new ELA, ELD, English language arts, English language development framework, which is very special in a variety of ways. It really brought the science of reading to California for the first time. It is organized around foundational skills, language development, comprehension, meaning making, effective expression, and content knowledge, which we know, of course, is a basis for learning to read. It was also the first framework in the country to bring English language development together with reading and the English language arts. Very, very important step in a state where more than half of our entering kindergartners are in homes where English is not the first language. And then in 2015, we had new funding coming in with the local control funding formula, a new accountability system, new assessment systems, and we've been on a new trajectory since then. And that when I say that we brought in the science of reading, a lot of people say, well, what is the science of reading? I think it was Becky who just mentioned some of her heroes in the Reading League, which is really the fount of a lot of the orchestration of this research. And they define the science of reading as a vast interdisciplinary body of scientifically based research about reading and issues related to reading and writing, from thousands of studies about how proficient reading and writing develop. And they are integrated. Learning to write helps you learn to read. Learning to read helps you learn to write. Why some have difficulty and how we can most effectively assess and teach, and therefore improve student outcomes. So it is a very comprehensive body of knowledge, and I'll return to that point later on in some new work that the Reading League has been involved in. So in those years, after we made all of these steps to reform that occurred following 2010, interestingly, California and Mississippi had the largest gains in fourth grade reading over that next period of time, that 8-year period of time, with Mississippi reaching the national average and California going a little bit more slowly, but a little further behind than Mississippi. And I'm going to come back to what Mississippi did. But California has had the largest gains of any state in 8th grade reading. And this is important because, of course, with so many English learners in California and with a 5 to 7 year trajectory for learning English from another language, we should be looking beyond 4th grade to where our students get to by 8th grade, which is the measurement point in the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And we, in fact, have increased more than any other state. We've gone from 48th to the national average, even as our student population has become more low income and more linguistically diverse. But we have such a long way to go still. In 2023, as you may know, on state assessments, we had 31% of students who did not meet grade level standards. The rates of failure are even higher for Black, Native American, Latino, and Pacific Islander students. We had score gains this year from last year only in 3rd and 11th grade, and writing was the area in which students scored the lowest, so we need to be paying attention. As I said, reading and writing go hand in glove, and we need to pay attention to both. Many people, however, have learned from what Mississippi did, and we need to be thinking about what we can learn from others. That trajectory that I just showed you has been dubbed the Mississippi Miracle because Mississippi was one of the lowest performing states in the nation. And there are some different views about the Mississippi progress. There is the fact that they do retain students in 3rd grade. So in the 4th grade, where the NAEP measures progress, probably 5 to 10% of students of the lowest performing students are not in that average. So that is something to take into account. They have not made progress in 8th grade reading in the same way. We are far ahead of them there. So those are things to take into account. However, I think they have made serious gains that are worth paying attention to. And they have been very purposeful about doing that. And I think we can learn from them. So what did they do during that period of time? They put in place a sort of a guide to curriculum. This is kindergarten. There's the reading block and the literacy block and other grade levels also enumerated. They put in place training for teachers. All kindergartens have trained teaching assistants. All schools have literacy coaches with access to extensive training. Many of the coaches are trained in letters, something made available in California, free of charge to any who want to undertake that training. They focus on active learning. They say no worksheets, at least 4 learning centers in every classroom, but they take the whole science of reading into account. Phonological awareness is a part of that block, word work around print concepts, phonics, word reading, every day vocabulary instruction so that we're building the knowledge of the vocabulary that is tied to comprehension. Everyday work on reading comprehension, read alouds, guided text reading for meaning, and a variety of texts available for students to read. Every day, writing connected to text beginning in kindergarten, teacher-led small group instruction, with flexible groups that individualize, because of course kids come into school with very different literacy needs. And the goal for teachers is to meet all of those, and that requires small group time and a variety of strategies for different students and literacy centers in which that can occur. A book library center is one that they recommend. Work around fluency, vocabulary, independent reading. So they've thought about all the pieces that go together. And there's some big takeaways from a state that has taken that approach. Systematic and explicit instruction and systematic and explicit supports. The fact that we will always need some additional work for students who need additional support. That's one of the things that is beginning to be understood about the literacy learning process. The comprehensive approach, the targeted instruction, the active learning in literacy centers, and then the trained coaches and assistants. So what is California doing, and what have we done? What are we trying to do? Where will we go? One thing is that, of course, it's been very decentralized in California relative to some other states. That's actually in our state law, that curriculum decisions are made locally. We can provide opportunities and recommendations for that, tied to our very, very helpful framework, which I think has driven some of our forward progress. But we really have to look substantially to local districts, which, as you know, have been all over the map in terms of how well they've tackled this task. And so we did a study some years ago of what we call positive outlier districts, those who had better gains than others for Black, white, and Latino and Latina students. The 7 that we dive deeply into are shown here: Clovis, Hawthorne, Chula Vista, Sanger, Gridley, Long Beach, and San Diego, to see what they've been doing. And remarkably, their approaches are similar to that comprehensive approach that we see in the Mississippi studies. They have a comprehensive approach that includes systematic explicit work on phonics, phonemic awareness, decoding, rich literacy environments with read alouds, texts that support cultural connections, opportunities for writing in every grade, connections between ELA and English language development, very important, particularly in our state, but really for everyone. And then use of formative assessments to guide instruction and intervention, regular use of diagnostic tools, focused small group work based on what's learned from the diagnostic tools, one-on-one tutoring routinely available where needed, planning for that to be part of that system, student-centered instruction, rather than just marching through the curriculum without, on a pacing guide. The teachers use the curriculum resources to help students reach mastery, making sure that they get what they need for where they are. Building on home experiences and cultural funds of knowledge, and then engaging in extensive professional development and coaching, not just the publisher's, workshop when materials are adopted, but professional development that includes cycles of inquiry in professional learning communities. These were all districts that found time for teacher collaboration, focused on joint planning and problem solving, observing each other in the classroom, analyzing student work and learning data, using coaches and reading specialists to facilitate that professional development, not only for teachers, but also administrators, so that they could support what's going on, and then supporting high need students in addition. So building on what we're learning, the state of California, certainly in the Newsom administration, has been building literacy supports in multiple ways. You've probably talked about some of those in the last day and a half. We have a comprehensive state literacy development plan, which has led to centers for professional development around reading at each developmental level. We have a dyslexia initiative launched, to thank Tammy Wilson for all the work that she is doing there, funded in the 2020 budget. We have grants for professional development, learning acceleration, reading instruction, and intervention. We passed universal TK, of course, in 2021, and that will be fully online by 2025-26 school year. And we're already beginning to see some of the gains that are associated with students having that opportunity to start universal TK at the age of 4. In 2022, we had new teacher preparation standards. Very important how we prepare teachers for literacy instruction. These are much more explicit about what kind of systematic explicit instruction is needed in teaching literacy. We have new preschool and transitional kindergarten learning foundations and learning progressions, and we hope those will carry us from pre-K all the way to 3rd grade. We have funding for literacy coaches and reading specialists, $500 million going to the highest need districts, because in places where we have had to hire teachers who were not prepared, did not yet have credentials, where there's been a lot of turnover, we need to have that expertise in the school, guiding the work, and then reading specialists available. And then, as was mentioned, hooray, in 2023, we got the universal screening bill passed, and the experts that are going to meet to recommend screeners are being selected over the coming month or two, and will be starting their work early in 2024. We've had funding for the UCSF screening project, which is really looking at all the sources of dyslexia and creating multilingual screening options. And then, of course, we have a literacy roadmap that I'll say more about that is coming online. Professional development is widely available. People don't always know where to find it, and that's a task that we're taking on. There are many kinds of professional development, ranging from letters to Core Academy, Orton Gillingham, Clear, reading acceleration, and so on. And then county offices are in charge of literacy projects at each of the developmental levels for Tier 1 and for Tier 2 instruction. And those are providing professional development across the state. So I want people to know about that. And of course, we're going to be doing more to get that out there. So some of you remember the sort of important initiative that the American Federation of Teachers took on in 1999, I think it was. Teaching Reading is Rocket Science. Louisa Moats was a key person there. She's also the person who designed the letters training. And she made the point, and continues to make the point in multiple ways, that we need teachers who are truly experts. And Marianne Wolf at the UCLA Center for Dyslexia recently wrote a wonderful paper on elbow room in the curriculum, but she made the same point, that teachers need to know how to match the instruction they're offering to the child and their needs to unleash the potential for the child and the future of our society. So part of the strategy has to be not just modest training of teachers, but deep, deep support for understanding the whole science of reading. And as Louisa Moats always has said, you have to couple explicit and systematic instruction with joy, with the joy of reading, using reading alouds and other motivating strategies. Our own dyslexia initiative here in California and many of the other reading strategies that we have underway, rely on the reading rope, as it were, the many different strands of language comprehension and word recognition that have to be woven together to get to skilled reading. And we now understand, and there's a lot in the journals, the reading journals now, about how that has to interact then with motivation, because in order to become fluent, kids have to want to read and practice and read some more. They need explicit instruction, and then they need lots of opportunities to engage with texts around their interests, around cultural connections, around opportunities for expression. And so that's the frame that the science of reading brings to us. There's an important thing that has recently happened that many of you probably already know about and probably have been part of, and that others will want to know about, which is the Reading League Summit in March of 2023, which ended up issuing a joint statement between the Reading League and the National Committee for Effective Literacy, which has really been developing the knowledge base, which is also part of the science of reading, on the teaching of literacy to emergent bilingual students and English learners. And then that joint statement, they really tackled how do we think about English language development and reading, English language arts literacy together jointly. And there has been some back and forth discussion before they got to the point where they had this summit and this statement. The statement is hyperlinked here. I'm going to share my slides in case anyone wants to find it. Thousands of people have signed on, including the Reading League and the Reading League of California, National Committee for Effective Literacy, Californians Together. Among our California groups, this is a national statement: Ed Trust West, Catalyst California, CABE, UCSF Dyslexia Center, and many, many more. And they wanted to clarify, this is directly from their statement, what the science of reading is not. They said it's not an ideology or philosophy, a fad, a trend, a new idea, or a pendulum swing, because it is really built on all of the accrued knowledge. It's not a political agenda or a one-size-fits-all approach or a program or instruction or a single specific component of instruction, but it is all of the things that have been learned about how to teach reading. And that will inform our literacy roadmap in California. And just to give you a sense of what that statement says, the science of reading for both native English speakers and new English learners is that all students receive comprehensive instruction that includes all the components of literacy, including language development, development of content knowledge, vocabulary, foundational skills for decoding, comprehension, and writing, that the foundational skills such as phonemic awareness, phonics, decoding, and coding are explicitly, systematically taught to impart the phonology and orthography of the language of instruction, that language development and literacy development must both be attended to, and they are not identical, although they are synergistic, that we should see home language as an asset to be valued and nurtured. We now know much more about the bilingual brain and how the connections that are made for bilingualism are not a deficit, but in fact, an enrichment to the functioning of the brain, to executive functioning, and actually to the development of neural connections in the brain. We know that opportunities to integrate language, literacy, writing, and content knowledge should be provided, and that we should use a wide variety of materials, including controlled and decodable texts, especially initially, along with informational text, narrative text, poetry, stories, etc., that continue to build the content knowledge, the vocabulary, and the other things that students will need as they eventually read independently in multiple genres. So our literacy roadmap really builds on this framework that I've been describing. It intends to produce some things that look somewhat like the guidance that Mississippi developed, but also will include explicit attention to our multilingual learners. It will include models of effective practice and evidence-based literacy instruction in all of the areas that we've described. It will provide practical guidance online for literacy block components across different grade levels in a variety of language settings, monolingual, dual immersion, and multilingual learning, and then other activities around webinars and consultations and convenings and access to resources. We think this will be helpful because the ELA ELD framework is a very robust framework. It is about 1,000 pages long. Not too many people have read it cover to cover. And breaking this down in a way that enables people to really think about how to do the teaching in a way that is systematic and explicit. Instruction along with systematic and explicit supports is important. We now have a literacy office in the California Department of Education with Bonnie Garcia and Nancy Brennelson providing the leadership for that office and helping to coordinate the literacy roadmap and these other initiatives. And so then the question becomes, where do we go from here in developing a comprehensive system? I want to acknowledge that the literacy framework is now, the ELA-ELD framework is now almost a decade old. And the materials that were recommended are also coming up to their 10th year anniversary. We at the State Board and State Department renew frameworks and recommendations for materials at the request of the legislature when the legislature funds it. And there is a conversation about how do we get to our next review of materials so that people can update their understanding of the materials that will be supportive of this goal. I want to sort of think about this comprehensive approach with help from a graphic that Claude Goldenberg developed, member of both the Reading League and the Committee for Teaching Effective Literacy. And we need to think about what all of our students need, the experience and instruction that, develop early language and knowledge and word reading, provide practice, promote reading and writing, address language development, and provide early screening with appropriate assessments, which we will begin to be able to do. And what else others need has to be thought about as we do this work. We need to be thinking about multilingual learners, our bidialectals who bridge different variations in English, such as African American English, at-risk students who we will hopefully be identifying sooner. And then we need to think about the ways that we're routinely ready to provide them additional supports, and then students who are dyslexic or who are identified with learning disabilities. So our comprehensive approach going forward has to think about the training of teachers, the provision of the right materials, the process of funding and providing the right kinds of supports in this kind of comprehensive and integrated literacy model, in which best first instruction is at the core with a multi-tiered system of supports that is routinely planned for, and then in ways that we understand that we're engaging the family, that we're celebrating diversity and an asset-based approach, that we're providing well-prepared teachers and leaders, and that we're taking a whole child perspective in which we're supporting social and emotional learning, positive identification with school, all of the process of learning to read in a way that is in a joyful environment with a joyful outcome and with health, safety, and nutrition supports. You know about our community schools initiatives, our mental health initiatives, and other investments in terms of nutrition, meals, that are all to support the capacity of children to learn to read. So these are my own grandchildren. That's why I do the work. You can think about the children that come to your mind that motivate you to put in all the effort that you put in. And I think about Victor Hugo's statement that to learn to read is to light a fire. Every syllable that is spelled is a spark. And once you learn to read, as Frederick Douglass put it, you will be forever free. That is the work that you are all doing. That you have really led the state to pay attention to and to deepen and enliven and fund and pursue. And we look forward to the journey forward, building on all of the work that you've already done and that we're pledged to continue to do. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Linda. So rich. And we're so grateful that you could be with us to share where we've been, where we are, where we're going. I have a few questions. Some are coming from the chat. Some have been coming from the beginning of the summit. And we've been eagerly waiting for you to join us so that we can have a little bit of a dialogue together. So first, we heard from one of our state panels that many states are offering, even requiring, comprehensive science of reading approaches training for current elementary school teachers. Is that something that California needs to do, intends to do?
Well, we are requiring that. That is to say, the teacher performance expectations and the guidance to schools of education for preparing teachers in California have incorporated the science of reading, and just in the last year or so have deepened the and made more explicit, more systematic and explicit, the guidance that schools of education will use to train elementary school teachers and secondary school teachers in the science of reading. So that was already a sort of a part of the guidance that schools of education had, but it's become much more clear, explicit, and detailed than it once was. It's also coming into, there's a teacher performance assessment in California, and that includes a literacy component, which is also being revised to be sure that it represents explicit teaching of the foundational skills, along with the other themes of literacy that you have seen enunciated. So that is happening. And then in terms of, I see a chat coming up about current practicing teachers. As I noted, we've made available many forms of professional development that are freely available for teachers all across the state. The state county offices have sort of a system of dividing up some specialty areas, but all of those, even if you're not in that region, are available to teachers from any region of the state. As I noted early on, we don't mandate what professional development districts will require of their teachers. That is a district decision, but we are providing an extraordinary amount of free professional development that can be required or encouraged by districts and schools.
Yeah, and from reading previous chats, that's a big source of frustration for so many in California, that even when we know how to do the right things, because we're district control, local control, we don't mandate. And so we have one participant who said, in other words, those that are doing the great work, some of the positive outlier districts that you reference, are essentially taking matters into their own hands. But does it mean that the rest will? So what might our approach be to make sure that we're moving away from practices that don't help our children read to those that we now know can help our children succeed in reading?
I think that the incentive structure for districts is really what you're asking about. And I think there's several elements of that. I think for one thing, and I mentioned, I showed our two co-directors of the new literacy office in California, something else we've been encouraging so that we have a focus. A lot of people don't know what the comprehensive science of reading is. They need to be reintroduced to it. So we're actually in the process of, from the department, reaching out to districts all across the state. Their accountability shows up in the dashboard, shows up in whether they're making gains in, English language arts and other content areas. And the California CCEE, I always stumble over what the acronym means, but the the California
Collaborative for
Lovely,
Educational
for
Excellence.
educational excellence. Thank you very much. Supports districts that are struggling and connects them with these resources, which are being aligned around a clear understanding of what the science of reading is. I think the process is really just leaning into all of those opportunities, both for leverage and accountability, as well as for the process of support and encouragement and learning that needs to go on. There are a lot of advocacy groups involved in this, and I see some popping up in the chat, and I also see professional development providers sending links to what they're offering, so I appreciate that too. But I think advocates and community groups also need to be able to say, we understand this, and we're looking, if we're not making progress, we're looking for that to be part of the LCAP, the Local Control Accountability Plan, and the other tools that we have for driving improvement.
Thank you, Linda. One thing that we've heard in other states, and we heard from Tennessee earlier today, was that they made reading the very top priority, not just one of many things. Would you say this is the very top priority in California? And will you and Governor Newsom be talking more about it? If it's a very top priority, how will you make sure everyone knows?
Well, as I said, this whole system that we've been talking about that includes the CCEE and the county offices and the department and so on. I think Governor Newsom talks about literacy a lot. I do when I have the opportunity to do it, but there are more people than the two of us to make it clear that literacy is important. And the amount of resources that have been put into literacy in the last 3 years in this administration is extraordinary. I listed all of those initiatives. That is continuing to go on, and the infrastructure for screening, for ongoing professional learning, for transforming preparation is all being put in place. So I think it's clear that it is a priority, and it will continue to be a priority.
Just a couple more questions. And this one has come from some of the speakers who were talking about the role of parents and family engagement. The majority of parents do not know what curriculum the school that their children go to uses. There's very little transparency. They don't know the difference between curriculum. What is the role that the state and all of us we should be playing to make sure that, first of all, we tell parents the truth. Most parents think their kids are on track. And that we equip them to really have the information about how their children are doing, the curriculum that is being used, curriculum that is aligned to the science versus curriculum that is not aligned to the science. I'd love your perspective on that.
Well, there's a lot of questions in there. One had to do with how do we help parents understand how their kids are doing, what the curriculum is. The other had to do with broader questions about curriculum. So let me see if I can take those one at a time. Again, I think this is a place where partnerships are always needed. So the PTAs, the parent organizations, the community-based organizations that we have, are increasingly getting involved in this conversation and can be part of that process along with the districts, along with the schools. The LCAP is a very important tool that I think some people use extensively and others maybe be less aware of, the Local Control Accountability Program, which every year requires that the district listen to members of the public around areas that need improvement and what is going on, and to both post and notify people about what the district is doing, including what curriculum is being used, et cetera, but also to have a lever for continuous improvement. So I think that using some of these tools is really important for parents. And then partnering with the organizations that reach parents. One of the things that we've invested in this administration is community schools. There are going to be about 1,000 community schools across the state in high poverty communities, where there is a built-in infrastructure for connecting more thoroughly and regularly with parents. And that's, doing that around the issues of literacy. I don't want to pretend that math isn't important too. But, we want to be sure that kids are getting all their foundations, is another strategy for being sure that we're getting the outreach.
Great.
And
One last,
just pointing to a resource on that. I love the way that the people in the chat are helping resource each other.
it has
with
been
all
a
of these.
wonderful, it has been a wonderful community. People are sharing their emails, tools, resources. One of the things that you'll see if you had the entire script of the chat is a sense of urgency that many of the folks that have joined us today have to this work, and a clear commitment that, as you said earlier, Linda, this is a civil rights issue. We have denied children for a very long time the opportunity to learn to read. And as a community, our goal is to build a movement to partner with you, with the State Board of Ed, with the Department of Ed, with CCEE, to get this right. As I like to say, because I've seen it over and over again, if our kids can't read, for too many of them, it is game over.
Yeah.
So what would your last words to us be about how we continue to fuel this movement and the opportunity to continue to be in dialogue with you and to partner with you?
Well, I mean, we make the road by walking it, right? And so if we decide that we are going to work together on this, it will happen. And I think that's the kind of commitment we all want to make, that this is a civil right. It is a human right. It is something that we know more than we ever did know before about how to do well. And we've got all of the enthusiastic both education that you're providing and advocacy, and a governor who cares about this and a legislature that cares about it. So we should take advantage of the moment to really lean in and ensure that every child is on that path to freedom, as Frederick Douglass said.
I love it. Thank you so much, Linda, for being with us. It is an honor to have this conversation with you. We will all, as somebody said earlier, stand, Becky Sullivan from SCOE, who reminded us to stand in our authority. And we all bring authority to make things right for kids.